Alright, friends. Reuven and Shimon await. Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavches, Daf Koyach. Friends, we're going to need some Koyach, not necessarily for this Daf. I mean, what do you want me to tell you, friends? We just learned the Daf. I mean, Yevamos is not easy. Yevamos is it's intense, man. How you guys doing with Yevamos? Friends, let's go weiter. So today, we're studying Daf Chavches of Masechta Yevamos. And we start out, the first part discusses the opinion that we saw yesterday at the end of Rabbi Yochanan, that whenever you have a situation when a Yevama is unable to do Yibum, so at the time that she becomes a Yevama, so then even if at a later point she's able to do Yibum, so it's still not allowed. For example, you can't get into example of anything there these days without getting into a whole complex, detailed thing of Reuven, Shimon, Sarah, and Rivka. So, you have Levi and he's got to do Yibum with like Sarah and Rivka, right? So like, Rivka, Lemaise, he can't do Yibum with Rivka because it's the sister of the other person who he has to do Yibum with, Sarah. So therefore, since at the time that Rivka had to do Yibum, she couldn't do Yibum because she's a sister of Sarah. So then, even if Sarah dies, and then still, now Sarah is out of the picture, but still you can't do Yibum with Rivka because at the time that Rivka became a Yibum thing, you couldn't do it because of Sarah. I feel like Jackie Mason. Alright, anyways. Let's start in Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. About 10-15 lines from the bottom. Eis Rabbi Yosef Chanina le Rabbi Yochanan. Gewaldig. So Rabbi Yosef Chanina taka asa kasha and Rabbi Yochanan. So again, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that if at the beginning, when the Yevama becomes a Yevama, you're unable she's un-Yibumable, so then even if she becomes Yibumable later on, so it doesn't work. But if at the time that she became Yibumable, she was Yibumable, so then even if at a later point she became un-Yibumable, when she becomes Yibumable again, so then Gewaldig. Let's do Yibum. There are 4 brothers, friends, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka. Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters. Reuven and Shimon die. So we say that Levi and Yehuda do chalitza with Sarah and Rivka, they don't do Yibum. Ve'amai. In fact, 1 second. Why not? Let Yehuda do chalitza with Rivka, and then Sarah with Levi will be that Sarah will be a Yevama who was Asur, who was Yibumable, and then became un-Yibumable, and then became Yibumable once again. Yibumable. I kind of like that. Yibumable. You guys mind if I say Yibumable? Yibumable. Yibumable. So, right, because we're assuming that Reuven dies first, then right when Reuven dies, so Sarah becomes Yibumable with Levi. Gewaldig. But Shimon dies. Now when Shimon dies, Rivka also falls into the Yibum thing, but now both Sarah and Rivka are un-Yibumable because they're sisters. Let Yehuda do Yibum let Yehuda do Chalitza with Rivka. Rivka is taken care of. Sarah now once again reverts to being Yibumable, so let Levi do Yibum with Yibumable Sarah. That's the kasha. Right, so if Rabbi Yochanan is right, that when you have a situation of somebody who's Yibumable, then they become un-Yibumable, and then they once again become Yibumable, so if you say that that's okay, so then how come when you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka, Sarah and Rivka are sisters, Reuven dies, then Shimon dies, how come Yehuda and Levi How come Levi and Yehuda need to do chalitza with Sarah and Rivka? Why can't Yehuda do chalitza with Rivka, and then Sarah, who was once yibumable, then became unyibumable, but now becomes yibumable once again when Rivka did chalitza with Yehuda, so let Levi do yibum with Sarah. That's the kasha. But the Mishnah says that no, both Levi and Yehuda have to do chalitza. Why? Friends, it's the kasha. Hamlei achayis and Yodea Mishnon. Says Rabbi Yochanan, I don't know about that. Says Rabbi Yochanan, yeah, I don't know who the author of this Achayus Mishnah is. I don't know. But v'lei malei mai cholzos nam diktani choletzes chada. But fact the Gemara, wait a second. Fact the Gemara, why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan just say, why does he say, I don't know what that Mishnah is talking about? Why doesn't he just say, oh, that's not a big deal. Yeah, when it says cholzes, it just means you have to do chalitza with one of them. You have to do chalitza with Rivka. B'tzara ein achinami. It's a situation of yibumable, unyibumable, yibumable, so you could do yibum. No problem. When it says that you do chalitza, it just means with Rivka. So cholzes katani, and for the Gemara, no, you can't say because it says cholzes, plural, i.e., Sarah and Rivka need to do chalitza. V'lei malei, my cholzes de alma. But one second, let Rabbi Yochanan say that it means in general you do chalitza, but in this case, who are you doing chalitza with? Rivka. Hare elu katani, but it says these, Sarah and Rivka are, you have to do chalitza with. Maybe you'll say that the reason why Levi and Yehuda have to do chalitza with Sarah and Rivka is because he first did chalitza with Sarah, and if Rivka was always unyibumable, so of course you do chalitza with Rivka. But Sarah was yibumable initially, but he already did chalitza with Sarah. All you have left is Rivka, and Rivka was always unyibumable. That's why you have to do chalitza with both of them. Cholzes l'chatchila katani. And for the Gemara, yeah, but cholzes implies l'chatchila, that this is what you should be doing. You should be doing in all situations chalitza with both Sarah and with Rivka. Now ask the Gemara, fact the Gemara, but wait, let Rabbi Yochanan respond and say, no, really, you can do chalitza with Rivka and then do yibum with Sarah. However, we're concerned that gezerah the makadim v'chalitza rishona b'reisha. We're just concerned that, well, if we let you do chalitza first with Rivka, maybe you'll do chalitza first with Sarah, and that will be a problem. So, yeah, but you can't say that because it says in the Mishnah v'lo misyabmos that no, you do chalitza, you don't do yibum ever. So there's no yibum b'chlal, not with Sarah, not with Rivka, not with anybody. In this case, where am I? Yeah. So maybe let's take a different route. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan can say, well, the reason why this Mishnah is saying that you have to do chalitza with Sarah and Rivka is because maybe the author of this Mishnah holds that there's no zika, and that really it's just a question of, if you do yibum with, with one of them, so what happens if right? So like if Levi does yibum with Sarah, so what happens if Yehuda dies? Then you can be mevatel mitzvah of yibum from Rivka. We don't want to do that. But Rabbi Yochanan lemisa lo chayish. Rabbi Yochanan is not concerned that Yehuda is just going to suddenly die. V'leimlei Rabbi Elazar, let Rabbi Yochanan respond and say, oh yeah, that Mishnah with Reuven, Levi, Shimon, Yehuda, Sarah, Rivka, that is Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Maybe that Mishnah is simply Rabbi Elazar's opinion. That Rabbi Elazar disagreed. That Rabbi Elazar's opinion is that once Sarah becomes unyibumable, when Shimon dies and Rivka becomes also shaykh to Yibum, so once Sarah becomes unyibumable, then that's it, it's permanent. She can never become yibumable again. So maybe just say that Mishnah happens to be Rabbi Elazar, and that is why we say that you have to do chalitza with Sarah and Rivka. But the Chacham would disagree. V'neima, so where am I? Olamis, the Sefer Rabbi Elazar, Reish Lav Rabbi Elazar. Well, if you look at the Sefer, if you continue reading in the Mishnah, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Beis Shammai Omer Yikayim. The Rabbi Elazar says that according to Beis Shammai, you have to, if they got married, so you can leave it, fine. But so from the fact that Rabbi Elazar comes up right after that in the Mishnah, means definitely that the first part is not Rabbi Elazar. V'neima lehu dinaful b'vasachas. But maybe Rabbi Yochanan could say, oh, you know why you have to do chalitza with both of them? Because Reuven and Shimon died at the same time. They were riding a bicycle together. Is that called a tandem bicycle or something? They were, riding on one of those bicycles where you can get two people on at the same time. And then there was drone, and it killed them together simultaneously. So Sarah and Rivka become shaykh to Levi and Yehuda and Yibum at the same exact time. So therefore, there's no such thing as Sarah was initially permitted and then she became not permitted. Alright, well, in our terms, Sarah was initially yibumable and then she became unyibumable when Rivka also became a Yevama, but that's not the case over here because Sarah and Rivka both became Yevamas at the same time. So maybe that's why the Mishnah says that you have to do chalitza with both. But if it was one after the other, so then maybe you would be able to do Yibum with Sarah after the chalitza happens with Rivka. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Dom Efshel Tzamtzin. And that would be like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says that it's possible for these things to happen simultaneously. It's possible for Reuven and Shimon to both be eliminated at the same time. To which the Gemara says, yeah, but we don't see a Stam Mishnah like Rabbi Yossi. Oh wow. Friends, remember when I came up with all sorts of methods when we were learning Masechta Taanis for how to not cough? What was it if you take a deep breath? I think that was a good thing. So I have to bring out those little tricks again, a shtickle. But so lo sasamlan Tana Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Well, we don't see anywhere that we have a Stam Mishnah like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. I.e., we don't see that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that Rabbi Yochanan would be willing to say, oh yeah, it's like Rabbi Yossi Aglili that Reuven and Shimon died at the same time. But then maybe say, okay, fine. So maybe they didn't necessarily die at the same time, but maybe we simply just don't know if Reuven died first or if Shimon died first, and if we don't know who to do chalitza with. But if that's the case, then why would the Mishnah say that if Shimon and Levi, that if Levi and Yehuda went ahead and did Yibum with Sarah and Rivka anyways, then they cannot remain married? But why would that be? If we're talking about a situation where we don't know if Reuben died first or if Shimon died first, Bishlama Rishon, I understand that, the first one to get married will say, why are you allowed to do that? There are two sisters, the Zikas, you can't do that. But the second one to get married, Omar, let him say, Chavroi Shniya Yibim. So let's say, I don't know, right? So again, we don't know if Reuven died first or if Shimon died first. So therefore, if Reuven would die first, so then that means that Sarah became Yibumable first. And then when Shimon died, Sarah became unyibumable because she's Rivka's sister. And then of course, if Shimon died first, then it's vice versa. So we said in our Mishnah that if Levi and Yehuda do Yibum with Sarah and Rivka, so they cannot remain married. But why? If we're saying that we don't know if Reuven died first or if Shimon died first, say Yehuda does Yibum with Rivka. So we'll say, hey, Yehuda, why are you doing Yibum with Rivka? I mean, right, she's the sister of your Zika. But once he does Yibum with Rivka, fine, but then let Levi, when he then does Yibum with Sarah, let Levi say, Ana Rishona Miyabim. Right, let Levi argue, oh yeah, Sarah, I'm assuming that Reuven was the one who died first. I'm assuming that Reuven's the one who died first. And therefore it's essentially a suffix. And it's possible that if Reuven really died first, then Sarah was yibumable and only became unyibumable when Shimon died. And therefore let Levi say that I'm doing yibum with Sarah, and Sarah is yibumable now. So why would the Mishnah say that you have to do chalitza with both of them? So I need to kamalei achayis enidei Mishnah. That is why Rabbi Yochanan says, look, I don't know who the author of this Mishnah is, because there wasn't really a good, clear way for him to sort of shtim his opinion with that Mishnah. Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah, achas men asura al ha'echod iser erva asur ba umuter ba'achos v'asheni asur b'shtein. Friends, let's read that again. So basically, so what happens? You have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters. Reuven dies, Shimon dies. Now here's the thing. Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law. Rivka, Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law. That's it. Right? And therefore, for Levi, so obviously he's not doing Yibum with Sarah because it's an erva. It's his mother-in-law. So he could do Yibum, so she's out of the picture. Sarah's out of the picture. So he could do Yibum with Rivka. Now Yehuda is also both Sarah and Rivka because they're sisters. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, let's read that again. Tanam, we learned in our Mishnah, so achas men asura lo echad iser erva. So if Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, Asur bas, so Levi is asur to Sarah umutu ba'achosa. But because Sarah is out of the picture, so Rivka is not achos kukaso, because Sarah is not his kuka. So therefore, Levi can do yibum with Rivka. V'asheni, but Yehuda asur b'shtein is asur with both Sarah and Rivka. Sakadaitech de nafla chamoso tchila. And now it enters your mind that Reuven died first. And therefore the Gemara asks, ve'amai, how come Yehuda needs to do chalitza with Sarah, right? How come Yehuda is asur on both Sarah, with both Sarah and Rivka? But fact the Gemara, if Reuven died first, which means that Sarah now was part of the Yibum situation, and right off the bat, Sarah is asur to Levi because it's his mother-in-law, but was mutter to Yehuda because she's Yibumable. And then Shimon dies, at which point Levi is permitted to Rivka, because since he's asur to Sarah, because his mother-in-law, he's mutter to Yibum with Rivka, because they're not as kukas. Now, let's say, so now Yehuda is asur on both, has a zika with both Sarah and with Rivka. But let's say he had the zika, right? He had the zika first with Sarah because Reuven died first. So when Levi does Yibum with Rivka, which he's allowed to do because since Sarah is his mother-in-law, she's out of the picture. So Levi does Yibum with Rivka. So once he does Yibum with Rivka, well then, Legabe Yehuda, Sarah becomes Yibumable again, and let it be a situation where you have Sarah was Yibumable, then she became un-Yibumable, But then when Levi does Yibum with Rivka, Sarah becomes Yibumable again. So why are we saying that Yehuda is also on both Sarah and Rivka? Why don't we say that once Levi does Yibum with Rivka, let Sarah become Yibumable once again to Yehuda? So V'amai, how come we say that Yehuda is also by both Sarah and Rivka? Leiku Chasin, let Levi come, Liabim Hach Deina Chamoso, and do Yibum with Rivka, Bereisha first, V'tavi Chamoso L'gabi Idach, and then Sarah with vis-a-vis Yehuda, Ki Yevamos Shuchu V'neso V'chazav Utra Tachzul Eterishin. Let Sarah be like a Yevama who was Yibumable, then became unyibumable, and then became Yibumable once again, and let Yehuda do Yibum with Sarah. Well, that works out well if Reuven dies first, but he didn't. Shimon died first. So there goes that. Rivka was the first one to get to be Yibumable. Sarah from the outset was unyibumable because Rivka was already a Yavam Darin. The Mishnah continued to be Rabbi Elazar Omer says Rabbi Elazar Beshami Omer v'chule. The Beshami says that if Levi and Yehuda had married Sarah and Rivka, they could stay together. Beisil says that they cannot. Tani with Takalun and Brisa. Rabbi Elazar Omer says Rabbi Elazar Beshami Omer says Beshami. Yikaimu, they could stay together. Beisil Omer Yotziu. Beisil says that they got that Levi and Yehuda cannot stay together with Sarah and Rivka. Reb Shimon Omer says Reb Shimon Yikaimu, they could stay together. Abba Shaul Omer Kal Hayulayim Beishami. Abba Shaul argues with Rabbi Elazar and says no, actually Kal Hayulayim Beisil, that Beisil was the ones being lenient B'davar Zeh regarding this. Shebeishami Omer Yotziu Beisil Omer Yikaimu, that Beishami says that they gotta go, that Levi and Yehuda cannot remain married to Sarah and Rivka, whereas Beisil says that they can stay together. Reb Shimon Kiman. Now when we say that Reb Shimon says Yikaimu, that they could stay together, who's he saying? Like Beis Shammai, Hanu Reb Elazar. If he's saying like Beis Shammai, that Beis Shammai says they could stay together, well that's Reb Elazar's opinion. If he's saying that Beis Hillel says they could stay together, Hanu Abba Shaul, that's Abba Shaul's opinion. This is what Reb Shimon is saying, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel actually agree on this, that they could stay together. So we said that, okay, right? So you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, Sarah, Rivka, Reuven, Sarah, Shimon, Rivka, Sarah, Rivka sisters. Okay. Now, Reuven and Shimon die. So now Sarah and Rivka need to do Yibum with Levi and Yehuda. Now the thing is that Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law. So we say that in that case, Levi can do Yibum with Rivka. So now, friends, we already learned this in the Mishnah on Daf Chaf Mur Aleph, where it says that when you have a situation like this, you have two sisters, Sarah and Rivka, and Sarah is the mother-in-law of Shimon, of Levi. So Achosa, so her sister Rivka, when they both are part of this Yibum situation, that Rivka can do Yibum or Chalitza with Levi. So Tzricha. So we need both. We need the Mishnah and Daf Chaf as well as the Mishnah here. The Ashmain and Hasam, because if we only had the case over there, Mishum Delek and the Migzam Mishum Sheni, because over there there's no there's no reason to make a gezerah because of Yehuda. Right over there, we're only talking about Levi. Reuven and Shimon die, and then you have Sarah and Rivka. Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law. So we say that Levi is permitted to Rivka, but over in that case, there's no Yehuda there who would be also to both. But over here, where there's Yehuda who's also, so I might think that Levi would also be also. So Emalo, so I would say that maybe Levi would not be permitted to do Yibum with Rivka. So we say no, even here when there's Yehuda, Levi could still do Yibum with Rivka. V'yashmin and Hacham, if we would only have over here, Mishum Dika Sheni Dika Mucha, that the fact that you have Levi who's not allowed to do Yibum, right? Who's also, I'm sorry, from the fact that you have Yehuda, who's also with both Sarah and Rivka, so then, it shows that in general, sisters would be also because of the Zika. But over there, the Lekasheni, Emelo, but over there, by, in the Mishnah Daf Chav, where there's no Yehuda in the equation, so it's only Levi, so then I might think that, well, if we let Levi do Yibum with Rivka, you might get the wrong idea and say that it's okay to do Yibum when they're sisters. So, Tzricha, that's why we need both of these cases to say that both when there's a Levi and a Yehuda, as well as when it's only Levi, if either Sarah or Rivka is, Levi's mother-in-law, so then, Levi can do, right? So if Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, so you can do Yibum with Rivka. Alright, exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. Now continue the Mishnah, Isra Mitzvah v'chulei. So if Sarah, however, was only also to Levi as an Isra Mitzvah, it's not like an Erev, it wasn't his mother-in-law, maybe it was like, did we say his mother-in-law's mother is also, but let's say, it was his grandmother or something, I don't know. So one of like the Shnias Larayis, right? So let's say it was, one of the Shnias Larayis, so then, Levi would, right, then he would not be able to do, Yibum with, Rivka. So now, Hanami Tanina. So this is also, we learned in that Mishnah, right? So if it was just an Isra Mitzvah, so then Levi would do Chalitza with Rivka. So Nami Tanina. Wait, you do Chalitza with Rivka, Mistama also with Mistama with Sarah as well. Somebody's gonna have to do Chalitza with Sarah. Anami Tanina, there's also a Tana Mishnah, right, in that Mishnah Daf Chav, Isra Mitzvah v'Isra Kedusha Choletzes v'lo Misyabemis, that when you have a situation of Yibum, and it's with a, Shnias Larayis, or with Kedusha, we said it was like, Chalutzu L'Kohen Hedjed, or whatever, so Isra Mitzvah v'Isra Kedusha Choletzes v'lo Misyabemis, you do Chalitza, you do not do Yibum. So, and for the Gemara, Hasum Isra Mitzvah L'chuda, Hach Isra Mitzvah V'achosa. Well, there's a difference, which is that in the first case, it was just talking about when there was an Isra Mitzvah. So, for example, it's just Sarah, right? So Sarah needs to do even with Shimon, but it's like Shnias Larayis. But over here, it's not just Sarah; it's Sarah and her sister Rivka. Hach Isra Mitzvah V'achosa. Sagadati Chamina may have thought to say, Leikum Isra Mitzvah B'makom Isra Erva. Let the Isra of the mitzvah of the Shnias Larayis be treated b'makom Isra erva as though it was an erva v'tisyabim, and then I might think, let's treat the Isra mitzvah of Sarah as if it was an erva, and then let Levi do Yibum with Rivka, the sister. So Kamash Malan, therefore we're saying no, you can't do Yibum with Rivka. We do not treat the Isra Mitzvah as an Erva. Kamashman v'tisyabim. In fact, wait, how can you say that Levi could do Yibum with Rivka? Came into Mida Oraisa, Ram Yukame, since Mida Oraisa, right? Sarah is it has to do Yibum with Levi. Right, because we're saying it's a Shnias Larayis, it's a Derabonon. So since Midoraisa, Sarah would have to do with Yibum with Levi. If we say that Levi can do Yibum with Rivka, he's going to be doing Yibum with the sister of his Kuka, Sarah, who Midoraisa has to do Yibum with. Well, Sakadati Chamino Mishum Mitzvah of Rabbanon Kamash Malay. I may have thought, well, look, at the end of the day, Zika is a Din Derabonon. And therefore, I may have thought that in the context of Yibum, in order to do the mitzvah of Yibum, so we could treat the Isra mitzvah of Sarah as if it was an erva, so that Levi can do Yibum with Rivka, so that Levi can do Yibum with Rivka, and we would waive the Zika, which is only anyways in the Rabban Kamash Milan. No, we do not waive that Zika. And if Sarah is an Isser Mitzvah, so then you do Chalitza with Rivka. Continue the Mishnah, Isa Achasmein v'chulei, right? Then we had like the double situation, right? So if you have Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, Rivka is Yehuda's mother-in-law. So that's the case. So we say, well, Levi could do even with Rivka, Yehuda could do even with Sarah. So Asulam, Lifek the Gemara, why do I need this case? Hanoach, isn't that basically the same thing as when Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law and Rivka isn't anybody's mother-in-law? So what's the difference? So we're saying so just like when Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, so he could do even with Rivka. So then obviously, if Rivka is Yehuda's mother-in-law, so then Yehuda can do even with Sarah. So so what's the big deal? Haruach, it's the same thing. What's the difference if it's for, one brother who's got the mother-in-law or two brothers who's got the mother-in-law? So tzricha. Awesome, if we only have the one brother-in-law, mother-in-law thing, because maybe I'll say that in that case, Levi could do even with Rivka, because you still have Yehuda, who it's going to be clear that, well, he's not doing even with anybody because of the Zikas, because the sisters. But in this case, where it's both sides, that Sarah is the mother-in-law of Levi and Rivka is the mother-in-law of Yehuda, that there isn't the second brother who it's clear that he's refraining from Yibum because of the sister stuff. So I might think that maybe in this case, you cannot, marry the other sister. Do Yibum with the other sister. If we only have this case, I can argue the opposite. From the fact that they're only able to do Yibum because both of them have an erva. But I might argue that the other case is not as noticeable, and therefore maybe I would say in that case Taka Levi would not be able to do Yibum with Rivka. So Kamash Malon. Therefore we have both cases. Therefore we have both cases to teach that when one of them is an erva, you could do Yibum with the other one. The Mishnah had continued. Zoi Sha'amu v'chulei. This is what they say. That I don't know. What do they say? This is what they say. That her sister, when they are ko-yavams, does either Yibum or Chalitza, right? That when Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, so then her sister Rivka can do either Yibum or Chalitza with Levi. So Zoe Lemute Mai. This is to the exclusion of what? Lemute Isser Mitzvah Laziv, Isser Mitzvah Laziv. To exclude the situation where Sarah is an Isser Mitzvah with Levi, and Rivka is an Isser Mitzvah with Yehuda, right? Like a Shnias Larais kind of thing. Hasulam li'anuach, ma'lilchad ma'lilitrei. But why? We already taught that the Isser Mitzvah, when there's a Isser Mitzvah between Sarah and Levi, so then Levi cannot do even with Rivka. He has to do Chalitza. So what's the difference if it's only Sarah or if Rivka is also Isser Mitzvah with Yehuda? So Ma'ud Tema may have thought Ki lo amrinan uki Isser Mitzvah b'makom Isser Erva. When we do not say that we could treat the Isser Mitzvah like an Isser Erva, meaning an Isser Erva, like a mother-in-law, so then Levi's allowed to do even with Rivka. But we said that doesn't apply to Isser Mitzvah. But maybe I'll say that it doesn't apply to Isser Mitzvah when it's only between Sarah and Levi. Right? Where am I? Isser Mitzvah b'makom Isser Erva. Eicha de'ika lemigzar mishum sheni. So that is only in a situation because you have to be concerned about Yehuda. Lemigzar mishum sheni ema lehai ukimna Isser Mitzvah b'makom Isser Erva. Ulai ukimna Isser Mitzvah b'makom Isser Erva. Uliyabmu kamash malan. But I may have thought that in this situation where it's kind of like symmetrical, where there's an Isser Mitzvah of between Sarah and Levi and between Rivka and Yehuda. So I might think in that case, let the Isser mitzvah be treated as though it's an Isser erva, and let Levi do Yibum with Rivka and Yehuda do Yibum with Sarah. So therefore, Kamash Malan, that we do not say that. What do you want me to tell you? Let's go back to Amar Yehuda Amar Rab. Friends, you may recall this following brisa from Daf Testament Beis. It's really complicated. Amar Yehuda Amar Rab says, Yehuda named Rav V'cheintani Reb Ta B'chulun Anikori Boyen, that in all 15 of the cases in our Mishnah on Daf Beis of Masechta Yevamos, by all of them, I say, Hasur loze mutaris loze, ve'achosa kishihi yivimta, o choletzes, o misyabemes. That in all 15 of these cases, you can have essentially what we're talking about in our Mishnah, right? That you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka, Sarah and Rivka are his sisters. Reuven dies, Shimon dies. So we say, well, if Sarah is Yehuda's mother-in-law, if Sarah is Levi's mother-in-law, and Rivka is Yehuda's mother-in-law, so Levi could do Yibum with Rivka, Yehuda could do Yibum with Sarah. So we say, well, it's not just mother-in-laws. We can have this also be with all sorts of things. I don't know, what were other things in the, I don't know, I'm scared to even think about it. I don't know, granddaughters, well, we're going to get into interesting questions about those, but I don't know, mother-in-laws was like mother-in-law's mother on there? I don't know. Chamoso, ve'em chamoso, ve'en chomiv, achosumimo, right? So in all of these cases, you can have something similar. It's like we've been saying with Sarah being Levi's mother-in-law and Rivka being Yehuda's mother-in-law. It could be also mother-in-law's mother, father-in-law's mother, right? Any of the 15 in the Mishnah, you could have this similar situation as well. Whereas Rav Yehuda only counts starting from Chamoso and onward, right? Meaning if you look at our Mishnah, there's like a whole bunch of sistery kind of things before then. Right? What does the Mishnah say? Chomish Senoshim, I'm on Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Pochus Tzarosem, V'tzar Tzarosem, Menachalitza, Menayibim, Atzof Ha'olam. Ve'eloin Bito, Uvaz Bito, Uvaz Beno, Bas Ishto, Uvaz Beno, Bas Bita, and then we get to Chamoso. So Rav Yehuda only says that from Chamoso and onward is where we can have a situation where there's an ever between Levi and Sarah, and between Yehuda and Rivka. But the first 6 items in the Mishnah, you cannot say that. Okay, fine. Aval shiza ba v'dereisha lo, my time outcome came in the bito be'onsinu de mishkachas lo, benisuin lo mishkachas lo, benisuin kamari be'onsin lo kamari. Well, since the only way that this would be possible is through bito me'anusaso, right? Meaning the only way for Yehuda, the only way for Reuven and Shimon to be married to Sarah and Rivka, who are right, to be married to Sarah and Rivka, who are sisters, and also to be, like, let's say, the daughter of Yehuda, of Levi and Yehuda, that could only be if we're talking about the, like, daughters through rape. Because if there was daughters through, like, marriage, well then you can't, you wouldn't be able to, like, marry your brother's daughter. So you wouldn't be able. No, I'm sorry, you wouldn't be able to marry your brother's wife, right? Kilu. The only way that you'd be able to have these daughters, right? So, like, right, meaning if we're saying that Reuven and Shimon die, and now Sarah and Rivka need to do Yibum with Levi and Yehuda, but they can't because, like, it's their daughters. The only way that would be possible would be from, like, a rape, right? Because if Levi and Yehuda, like, married these women and they gave birth to these daughters, well then Reuven and Shimon wouldn't be able to marry them because it would. No, I'm sorry. Then right. I'm sorry. If in order for Sarah and Rivka to be sisters, they would have to come from the same woman, right? And if they're coming from the same woman, so, you know, if Levi was married to a woman and they had Sarah, Yehuda wouldn't be able to be married to the same woman because it's the wife of his brother, Eishes Ach. So if the only way that Levi and I don't even know what names I'm saying anymore, but right, basically Sarah and Rivka we're saying are the daughters of Levi and Yehuda, and they were married to Reuven and Shimon, such that when Reuven and Shimon die, Sarah and Rivka now have to do Yibum with Levi and Yehuda, but they can't do it because it's their daughters. Now, we're saying that Sarah and Rivka are also sisters, which means that they come from the same woman. Now, if Levi was married to this woman, Yehuda wouldn't be able to be married to this woman also because it's Eishes Ach. The only way that could work out is if we're talking about through rape. And because we're talking about, and therefore, Rav Yehuda says we're not talking about rape here, we're only talking about marriage, and therefore he excludes the first six because they're the only way that they could be would be through ones and not through Nisuin. Fine. Abai Metagiv Abito Manusoso. Abai says no, he has no problem. Abai has no problem including the first six because he includes even Bito Manusoso. Kevin da Ashkuche Mishkachasla Ibai Bonsen Tave Ibai Benisuin Tave. Abai says, look, the fact of the matter is, as long as we could find out some way to concoct the case where you'll have Sarah and Rivka becoming before Levi and Yehuda as an erva, even if it's through own sin, it doesn't matter, it can still be counted. Aval Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo lo kem da liba de Reb Shimon hu timishkachas la liba de Rabbanan lo mishkachas la beplukta lo kamari. Ooh la la. Ooh la la. So let's read again. Aval Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo. Of course, Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo was one of the 15 cases listed in the Mishnah on Dav Beis. Lo, says Abaye, that case is excluded. Kevin the Aliba de Reb Shimon hu de mishkachas. The only way to have a situation where Sarah and Rivka are going to be Aser on the brother, right, on Levi and Yehuda, although really it's going to have to be Yisachar and Zvulun, we'll get there in a minute. But let's just keep our names for now. The only way, right, for Sarah and Rivka to be Aser on Levi and Yehuda because of Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo would be according to the opinion of Reb Shimon. You can't, it would be impossible according to the rabbis, but Plukta Lo Kamari, and we're not including Machloksin. Right. Rav isn't talking about any Machloksin, so therefore Abai excludes since the only way to make it make sense is according to Reb Shimon, as we'll see in a minute. Rav Safra Matagim Af Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo. Rav Safra even includes Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo. Umishkachas lo b'shisa ache b'alibu de Reb Shimon. And the way to have this situation of Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo is with 6 brothers: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. Davka according to Reb Shimon, B'simanach meis nolad v'yibem, and the way to understand how to get this situation is with the sort of model of meis nolad v'yibem. One died, one was born, one did yibum. Okay, now we're going to explain exactly what the case is. Maybe actually I'll explain it outside first. It's a bit messed up. Okay. Well, at least we already learned the second parak of Masechta Yevamos, so we're familiar with the concept of Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo and the opinion of Reb Shimon, who says that if the baby was born, right? So, for example, if you have Reuven and Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka, Reuven dies, and then Shimon does Yibum with Sarah. And then Levi is born. So since when Levi was born, Shimon was already married to Sarah, so it's not a situation of Eishes Achav Shloi Ba'olamo. So now, applying to our case. So, if you have a situation of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, Reuven is married to Sarah, Shimon is married to Rivka, Sarah and Rivka are sisters. You ready, friends? Reuven dies. Yisachar is born. Now, when Yisachar is born, Sarah didn't do Yibum with Shimon yet. So therefore, when Yisachar is born, Sarah is Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo. So Sarah is always going to be Asr on Yisachar because of Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo. Levi now does Yibum with Sarah. Shimon now dies. Zvulun is born. So now at the time that So again, Shimon dies, Zvulun is born. So now Rivke now is also on Zvulun because at the time that Zvulun was born, Rivke was newly widowed and nobody had done Yibum with her yet. So Rivke legabe Zvulun is Eishasachur Shloya Ba'olamo. However, Rivke legabe Levi is fine because Rivke legabe Yisachar is fine because when Yisachar was born, Shimon hadn't yet died, and Rivke was married to Shimon. So okay, fine. Givaldik. So now what happens? So now Yehuda does Yibum with Rivke. So now where things stand, Levi has done Yibum with Sarah, Yehuda has done Yibum with Rivke. I don't know if I said when I was setting up the case that Sarah and Rivka are sisters. They're not sisters, because if they were sisters, then Yehuda and Levi would not be able to do Yibum with them, as we've been saying. Okay, fine. So, Givaldik. So to recap, Ruvain is married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka. Ruvain dies, Yisachar is born, Levi does Yibum with Sarah, Shimon dies, Zvulun is born, Yehuda does Yibum with Rivka, Levi and Yehuda die. So now listen to what happens. Levi and Yehuda die. So now Sarah and Rivka need to do Yibum with Yisachar and Zvulun. Now Sarah cannot do Yibum with Yisachar because when Yisachar was born, Reuven had just died, and Shimon hadn't yet done, and Levi hadn't yet done Yibum with Sarah. So therefore, Yisachar can't do Yibum with Sarah because she's Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo. But he can do Yibum with Rivka because when Yisachar was born, Rivka was still married to Shimon. So it's not Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo. So let Yisachar do Yibum with Rivka. Now Zvulun cannot do Yibum with Rivka because when Zvulun was born, Shimon had just died and Yehuda had not yet done Yibum with Rivka. So Zvulun is also to Rivka because Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo, but he's permitted to Sarah since when Zvulun was born, Levi had already done Yibum with Sarah. So that's a case where there's Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo between Yisachar and Sarah, and between Zvulun and Rivka, and therefore Yisachar could do Yibum with Rivka and Zvulun could do Yibum with Sarah. Now, that only makes sense according to Reb Shimon, who says that, since when Zvulun was born, Sarah was already did Yibum with Levi, therefore Sarah is not Eish Yisachar Shlei Ba'olamo with Zvulun. That only makes sense according to Reb Shimon, not according to the rabbis, and therefore it's dafka through that machlokas. So here we go. Now the Gemara spells that out for us. Ruvain v'Shimon. So you have Ruvain v'Shimon. Nesuin shtei achayis. Wait, they're married to sisters? Wait, why are they married to sisters? 1 second. Because since Ruvain is dying before Shimon dies, so therefore there was no zika at any, right? Yibum already happened before the other one died, so there's never any issue of like achos kukaso. Okay, fine. My apologies. So, Ruvain v'Shimon, so you have Ruvain v'Shimon, Nesuin shtei achayis, they're married to two sisters, Sarah and Rivka. Fine. Levi v'Yehuda Nesuin shtei nachris. Levi and Yehuda are married to, I don't know, random Rachel and random Leah. Now, Meis Ruvain dies, Nolad Yisachar. Yisachar is now born. V'yibim Levi, and then Levi does yibum with Saras. Now, Levi is married to Sarah and ate Sarah. Fine. Meis Shimon. Now Shimon dies, Nolad Zvulun. Zvulun's born. V'yibim Yehuda, and then Yehuda does yibum with Rivka. Meisu Levi v'Yehuda, and then Levi and Yehuda died below Banim without children. V'naf Lulu Kami Yisachar Zvulun. So now, Levi and Yehuda's wives are shaykh to even with Yisachar and Zvulun. Hasur Laze Mutaris Laze. So Sarah, who's also to Yisachar because of Yisachar Shlei B'Olamu, is permitted to Zvulun. Hasur Laze Mutaris Laze, and Zvulun, who's forbidden to Rivke and her co-wife because of Yisachar Shlei B'Olamu, Rivka is permitted to Yisachar. V'achosa sheyivimta. Fine. Beseder, and then the other one can do yibum or chalitza. Fine. Frak the Gemara. Lamali yibem Yehuda below banim. I'm sorry. Lamali yibem Yehuda below yibem Yehuda nami mishkachasla. So now, fact the Gemara, why do we need the situation to include Yehuda doing Yibum? We can have the same situation even if you skip Yehuda. So what would that case be? So, well, similar, just without Yehuda doing Yibum, right? So if you think about it, so you have Reuven is married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka, okay? So now Reuven dies, Yisachar is born. So now Yisachar and Sarah are Ish Yisachar Shlei B'Olamu. Now Levi does Yibum with Sarah. So now Levi is married to Sarah. Shimon dies. Zvulun is born, which means that Zvulun and Shimon's wife Rivke is Ish Yisachar Shelohaya B'Olamu. But at that point, Sarah is already married to Levi, right? So therefore, Sarah is permitted to Zvulun, but also to Yisachar, because when Yisachar was born, she had not yet done Yibum with Levi. And now, Levi dies. So where things stands, Shimon's dead, which means that Rivka needs to do Yibum. Levi's dead, which means Sarah needs to do Yibum. Now, Sarah is permitted to Zvulun, because she was already married to Levi when he was born, but is also to Yisachar, since when Yisachar was born, it was Eish Yisachar Shlei B'Olamu, and Rivke is permitted to Yisachar, since when he was born, she was still married to Shimon, but is also to Zvulun, since when Zvulun was born, Shimon had died and she had not yet done Yibum yet. So I didn't even mention Yehuda, and we can still have this situation where we have Asur Laze Mutaris Laze, Asur Laze Mutaris Laze. Fine. So Mishum Tzara, because of the co-wives, right? We want to talk about the co-wives as well. So therefore, we said that Levi and Yehuda also had co-wives, right? So by saying that Levi and Yehuda both died, so then Sarah and Rivka both move over to Yisachar and Zvulun with their co-wives, so we can learn about the co-wives of Eish Yisachar Shlei B'Olamu. Hatinach Tzara de Tzara Michael Memika Gondadi V'Yavminu Nami Gad V'Asher. Well, fine. So now, how do you have a situation of co-wives of co-wives? Well, what if God and Asher, right? So it wasn't just Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. There was Yisachar and Zvulun, but also God and Asher. So what if the co-wives of Sarah and Rivka then did Yibum with God and Asher, but because they were the co-wives of Sarah and Rivka, now if God and Asher die, so then those co-wives can't do Yibum with Yisachar and Zvulun, since they're the co-wives of the co-wives who were the co-wives of the co-wives of Sarah and Rivka, who are Eishes Achav Shlei B'Olamu with Yisachar and Zvulun. Friends, that was Daf Chof Ches of Masechta Yevamos. The first part of the Daf was discussing Rabbi Yochanan's opinion about when you have somebody who's yibamable, then becomes unyibamable, and then once again yibamable. So he says that you could yibam with her. And then we saw all sorts of complicated situations around different people being usher to different people with erva and other people being permitted. Peace.